The Demons decided not to let any of their stars go in last year's trade period. They are chips in on this list, and we were reminded of that at the best and fairest night last year.
I know come round one next year, when I see the first ball bounce and our midfield of Gawn, Viney, Oliver and Petrarca our first clearance, that you Melbourne faithful will be there in full force.
And here's the contract status of those players he spoke of. They're all contracted long term. All of them aren't travelling that well at the moment. Yes, we are only early, but I felt when Brad was making that speech, they were in that much damage control as a football club. They couldn't afford, getting Christian to start the club, getting Clayton Oliver to start. They were just looking for that word stability within that football club. But now they get to a situation where they're still losing anyway, and they've locked away all their players. So they're in no better position by having kept them. And Brad Green spoke about centre clearance, and that used to be their one word, centre clearance and defending the ball. They were a top 3 defence and also one of the best clearance sides. And 8 of the 9 losses they've had in recent time, they've lost clearance and lost them badly and been scored against really heavily. Consecutive weeks, 120 points against. So their one wood is disappearing for them. So they've got to find quickly a way to rejig the midfield mix. As we looked 2 weeks ago against North Melbourne when they started pummelling Melbourne, and it's starting at the initial clearance. All those names they're talking about, there's Viney, Gawn, Petrarca, Oliver, but sides are just matching them with the physical brutality which Melbourne has been known for, but then they're running away, and that's the issue as well. Look at all these contests. The initial contest is just as strong as Melbourne, but the class and polish and the ability to take it away is really hurting them. So they're going to find a way either to rejig or do something different if they're going to run with that mix or change that mix up. So, because we're in the middle of the year, you can't just go get a heap of new players. So what else can you throw through there? Look at that. They're all left at the stoppage in all these. Running away, powerful. I know that's a backup ruckman, but that's Flanders moving Viney out of the way there, and away they go. These all result in scores, which hurt them. They've gone from a top 3 defence, as I mentioned, to 7th. Now they're sitting currently at 15th.
And as we watch all this and witness what happened on the weekend in a disastrous fashion on field, their messaging has been mixed, and I think their actions have been very mixed as well. I mean, Brad Green himself was an interim chair and he was making list decisions. We learned after that particular performance at the best and fairest that he was ringing Clayton Oliver that day to say, you're staying, when he was being shopped around by the club and he was shopping himself around. And then they've embraced this love word and this embracing of the connection word. Last year it was culture, this year it's love.
Yeah, it was a bit weird when Cootie and Richo came to the board and presented this to us. We talked about love. This pre-season's been all about love, connection, the way we were connecting as players. You've got to love the game and love the people that you're playing with. If you don't have that, it's hard to win.
I do love this job. I do love this footy club. I love the people and I love everyone involved. I think the thing that gets you through your challenges in life is this word called love.
Yeah, I think both those boys use the word love. It's a pretty powerful word. It's not a word that is used a lot in football. It's a cool word to get behind. But yeah, in the end, we're going to be judged by how we play footy.
It started to emerge as fake love, and as we discuss that aspect of it, we just remind people this is the state of the club. There's no CEO in place at the moment. David Chippendale there is the interim CEO. He's vying for the main job, but hasn't got it. Stephen Smith is going to be, by Brad Green's own words himself, the next president, but is going to be overseas for a large part of the 2025 season. And obviously Simon Goodwin and Alan Richardson are still there as coach. But when they keep referring to the love aspect, Gordo, they've got a player in Petrarca who shopped himself around. We know that Oliver shopped himself around, and the club itself shopped him around before that. You've got a CEO who's gone and not yet replaced, and the chairperson, Kate Roffey, had to stand down last year over her handling of certain issues and public commentary. Yeah, I found it really interesting there, Brad Green. First I've heard the grab where he says that Goody and Richo came and presented it to us, and you can't fabricate it. You can't fabricate, okay, we want to bring love as our term and we're just going to try and generate that between getting it back at the football club, but it all comes from actions. Like, words mean nothing. And now, and particularly if you present it to a group of players and you got, say, a handful of them potentially sniggering or laughing or not buying into it, it just means nothing. And I know I've spoken to Richmond people around, they spoke about their vulnerabilities. Players got up and said, I haven't been this or I haven't been that. But you know what they did? They won their first 5 games and they had a game plan that they all believed in. They brought in a new assistant coaches who changed the whole thing.
and they found a belief out of winning and doing things on the field. Melbourne refused to run on the weekend. Melbourne refused to chase. Melbourne refused to defend. So that is all garbage, absolute garbage, and stands for nothing when you're not actually... they're just talking. And Melbourne have talked and talked for a number of years.
They did it last year with the culture word.
Yeah,
I mean, Gary Pertz is the best culture he'd seen in 40 years.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of that which has stood for nothing.
Do you think that when they're saying things like that, like the love piece, are they trying to almost force themselves into thinking it? Like we know that Ben Crowe has been doing a lot of work with him. This is the guy that, helped Ash Barty turn around a career, did a lot of work with Richmond. I just is it the self-talk? If we say it enough, Damo, maybe it will come true.
Look, I just think they were so desperate to draw a line on the disaster in so many ways of the previous, I'm going to say 2 years, 2023 and 2024. They went to the Bright camp. Again, they want us to know that. They want us to know they had the coming together, both before the official part of that camp started and even the days in the lead up to it. I think some of this is just on the run. We just need to draw a line on everything that's happened. We're starting afresh. But you can't forget what's happened. These are their two best players trying to get out of the joint.
Totally.
Right up to the deadline of trade.
Having said that, not trying to defend them at all, if they didn't do any of that, if they didn't try to change the narrative at all, and they were 0-3, we'd be sitting here and saying, oh, well, they're a club with their head in the sand, they refuse to acknowledge it, they refuse to try to change. So it's a little bit like what you said. If they'd done what Richmond did and started winning, well, they would be having a different conversation. But, Jimmy, this comment from Max Gawn, from Andrew Wu on the weekend was fascinating.
Yeah, the frustration. We know love can be frustrating as well, Sam. So there is a level of frustration with all the senior players. And we just picked some edits here. And you see Stephen May was clearly working his way back in the game, and he was under siege. And Ben King could have kicked 10 on him here. But Petrarca, he's arguing with the umpires. Johnny Noble, Fritsch has got his head down. That's a certain goal now. Him just running, that's like training drill sort of stuff because of the frustration, arguing with umpires, checking the big screen, have a look at that. So you can just see it boiling over, and you want the leaders just to stand there and just go, right, am I taking care of my own house here? Am I getting the job done? It just seems to be boiling over at the moment, and they just can't get anything going.
And on the other side of the equation, an amazing win for Damien Hardwick's side, who were actually finding that love was all around.
Yeah, but they've got a harder edge to them, the Gold Coast, and I think that's what we've been asking for. You mentioned Melbourne, where's the change? And Lloydie, for me, they talked the big talk. We had a year under Dimmer. We know his game style, and he's been pretty ruthless at the selection table and what he demands and what he wants.
And what's coming out of his mouth is proper what I want to hear as a footballer is we need to find an identity. Our identity, they've been... You can't trust them in the past, whereas they're trying to build an identity of trust. And yes, they've got to do more to it, but it's much better than talking about...
Those numbers, though, as good as they are, they've come against West Coast and Melbourne.
Yeah. And this is not the first time, the second time, the third time or the fourth time we've been sucked in early in the season by this footy club.
That is true. That is true. But
so you talk about actions. Let's see if they're continuing these actions.
It's been a good start. They couldn't have done any more.
They absolutely couldn't have done any more.